Hi, I'm Chris Wilson. Over the last few months, I've been making videos about game development and my experience from 17 years developing Path of Exile. But the emails I get from my fans all say, "Show us your Magic the Gathering cards." People in the Magic card community know me for my collection of original limited edition Alpha cards. But as much as I love Alpha, the cards that excite me the most are my land collection, which I've been working on for 22 years. And today I'm going to show you a specific part of it. In Magic the Gathering, land cards are ones that can be tapped to yield mana, a resource that you use to cast your spells. Almost every deck needs lands, making the good ones really sought after. I personally find the artwork and abilities of lands far more interesting than the entire rest of the game. So one way I can show you my land collection is like this, basically going through every single printing of every land card, in every language, in every edition, in every treatment. But I decided I'd rather start somewhere with a lot more story behind it, and that's the area of misprints and test prints. So let's start with misprints. What is a misprinted card? Well, if you've never opened a booster pack of Magic the Gathering before, I'll show you what the experience is meant to be like. As you can see, there's a very consistent level of card and print quality. The cards here are all well centered, they've got good surface, they're printed correctly. This is not the case for a lot of modern Magic cards. For example, if you opened a booster pack and you received one of these cards out of it, you'd probably be asking for your money back. But before you do so, it's important to understand that because these are a 1 in a million print error, they can actually be very valuable, and that's what misprints are, and I'd like to show you some today. Sometimes the misprints are rather subtle. For example, these are two printings of the same card, one of which is too light and one of which is too dark. The actual card would sit between those two. This is a misprint that's consistent across all printings of the card. This is a German forest, but it has the art for planes, and every time you find that card in that set, it's the same. It's not so much a printing error as the card was printed, but when the sheet that was printed was designed by the developers. This one's a bit more subtle, but basically some cards have this authentication stamp at the bottom of them. This particular swamp doesn't, but in this case it's printed at the top. This is probably because the sheet was put in backwards into the printer and another card's stamp was printed in that position. Here's a card that has some water damage. Basically some water got onto the sheet making this pool, and then it was cut so you can see the shape on this particular card. Now sometimes you get an effect that's even more dramatic like this, where you can see it's pulled across multiple cards. And this particular example also shows that the printing is done in layers. After that eradicated all of the color, they then printed the black for the basic land text on top of it. This is a card that's been miscut, meaning that when the die comes down to cut the card out of the sheet, it's misaligned. Sometimes that's quite extreme. You can get cases like this where you get the same card split across two different cards. This Halls of Mist straddles both of these Ice Age cards. Now, people who buy sheets off the internet sometimes intentionally miscut them like this. It's rare or impossible to get a card like that from the factory, and so cards like this are usually called not factory cut cards, and they're not usually considered misprints. Sometimes cards come out way too dark or way too light. Who knows what went on with the printing process to get these? You sometimes get quite interesting situations where certain layers of the card are shifted. For example, here the text is all shifted down, and you can even see that the mana symbols are not sitting in front of the colored circles that they're meant to. This card has a lot of blue. I do not understand why. And likewise, this one here has some significant black ink all over it. You can barely read what it does. And sometimes you get that in lines like this across the card. So another type of error is a crimping error, and that's where the machine that crimps the booster packs by making the seal along them, the bit that you can see on a pack like this, comes down in the wrong place and cuts the card. Oftentimes it doesn't fully cut the cards. You can see here there's the double crimp where it would normally break a pack there and the two packs that are being crimped would be there. And sometimes you get a crimp effect like this, which goes along the card in the other direction. This is a particularly interesting misprint because you can see the magic card back. This shape here is printed on top of the front of the card. So sometimes you get this effect where there's kind of a ghosting. The text is blurry, and that's because the text has been double printed. As a comparison, you can see here for these two cards, this is a normal Bazaar of Baghdad here. It looks quite crisp, and this is a double printed one where the text is printed twice very close to itself. I don't know if I can catch it on camera. Yeah, I don't think that's going to focus. All right. Sometimes you get multiple misprints combined into one. For example, this is a card here that, as you can see, is double printed, it's ghostly. It's also been miscut quite dramatically, but the back is normal. And so when the back is normal and the rest is miscut, it means that the sheet has been actually misprinted rather than miscut. So the front of the card is in the wrong place relative to where it should be for the back of the card. Here's a couple of cards that are quite interesting. They've got texture on them. So you can see here, this shape here, you can actually feel with your finger as a ribbed portion of the card, and the same there. And this is because there's kind of like a foil layer which has the ability to get air stuck underneath it for these two foil cards. This Underground Sea has a subtle print error. Basically, this corner here is square. The die is normally meant to be like this. And so that takes a revised Underground Sea that is worth a reasonable amount of money and makes it quite a lot more special because of the square corner. This card ostensibly has nothing wrong with it at first glance, but when you look on the back, you can see that the back is flipped upside down. So that's a case of them putting the entire sheet in backwards. This one's very interesting. It looks like it's missing a corner, but when you have a look, you can see that the card includes a whole portion of the corner of the sheet that's been folded over. And so you get this ridiculous effect like that. And so that's how the edge of a magic card sheet looks. This card has an albino front. Basically, it's a normal magic card, but there was something that went significantly wrong with the amount of color ink that was used on it. And that's in comparison to this card here, which has an albino back. The presence of one card like this suggests there's an entire sheet, of course. This one is moderately subtle. Basically, this is the Happy Holidays card for 2014. It's a silver border card which Wizards sent out to celebrate the holidays to various people. And there's meant to be a gold stamp here that says Happy Holidays 2014. And I'm not sure if you can see on the camera, but basically there's just the embossed marking of it without actually having the gold stamp. So here's another example of a card. This is a pre-release card which is meant to have the gold stamp down there, and it's been shifted up there. So basically the stamping process has put it in the wrong place. And this particular one is still within its pre-release pack. Basically, when you attend a pre-release event, they give you a special rare card in a pack, or at least they used to. And in this case, the stamp was done incorrectly. Here's another pre-release card in a pack, and this one's particularly interesting. So these particular cards have a mechanic that while you're playing them, you get to flip them over, in this case into a land, which is why it counts for my land collection. And these particular Portuguese ones flip into the wrong card. So down the bottom here, this one says card number 173, and when you flip it over, it goes into 158. And so these are ones where the back and the front are misaligned with each other, as in the wrong backs are used for the wrong fronts. These are cards you shouldn't expect to find in booster packs, but occasionally do. Essentially, it's where they have specific slots on the sheet that they don't want to actually print cards in, so they put void or X cards in those places, and the idea is that those don't get put into booster packs. But sometimes you find them because of manual human error that's occurred. So this is a card that's been double printed on the front. It's an Ebon Fortress and it's an Ebon Stronghold and an Elven Fortress from Fallen Empires overlaid on top of each other, but otherwise is a normal magic card. I actually have the original art of Ebon Fortress. This is another double printed card, but in this case it's French and English for the same card. So Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle, or whatever it is. Actually, this isn't French and English, is it? This is... Nope, that is French and English. So the French one is on top, English is underneath. Here's a few more of these double printed cards. Now this set called Jumpstart the original printing of it had a lot of stuff like this. People were finding them all over the place in booster packs. Basically, we have just 2 different cards printed with different intensities. You're getting all this black stuff along here that's been offset and shifted. Who knows what's going on with that process? Some of the Jumpstart cards look like this, where this is like a mountain and a forest printed on top of each other, creating this really cool kind of dual land. In a similar vein, a gentleman online opened a set of Commander and found cards like this, which were double printed, including a magic back. So in this case, for example, this is a forest with a magic back, and this one is the Celestia Sanctuary with the magic back. But when you flip them over, you've got even more double printing going on. So both the front and the back are double printed. These cards are interesting. So this is a Swamp, a Goblin Burrows, and a Temple of the False God. And at first glance, they look completely normal. But when you flip them over, you see that they are actually Harry Potter cards. And these were cards found in Harry Potter booster packs, which were printed at the same factory as Magic cards for a while. And so people found Magic cards in their packs, which upset them. But Magic collectors were incredibly keen to get their hands on those. Some of my favorite misprints are these older albino Urza lands here. And so these have been incredibly hard for me to track down. And if you have any like this from the Urza land cycle, I would love to acquire them. So essentially, these are cards where it's not that the card is sun-faded, like you can stick a card in ultraviolet and it goes white like this, but in this case, the black is still really stark. This is the case of there being basically no color ink available. And it's really cool when you get a misprint like this to try to track down others like it, because there's theoretically a whole sheet of them available. This is a bit of a crazy card. So essentially, the special stamp that they put down here is made out of a special type of sticker that they apply, and it comes in these sheets here. And so this particular pre-release, I believe, simplified Chinese card has entire sheets of that stamp just sticking to it, kind of showing the process that they're using internally at the factory. This misprint is just nuts. I don't know what happened with that card. That's just a very strange one. I like oddball ones like this that I've never seen other copies of. Likewise, this mountain is weird, and if you're looking for a single mountain to put in like a commander deck or something, that's the kind of thing that just really stands out. All right, so next up we have, so this is a non-misprinted Guru land, and it looks like just a regular basic island, and that's because it is, and it has this special symbol here, which is like one of those academic caps. You know, when you graduate from university, you put your flat cap on. And the idea with Guru lands is that they were a very limited thing that were given out to people that were teaching other people to play Magic way back in the day, like in 99. And so Guru lands are expensive. Like, I don't know the current price, that's more than $1,000, and they pretty much all look like this with a symbol there. But there's a variation of a Guru land where they put the symbols in the wrong way around, and so you get this situation here, where instead of being printed there, it's printed on that side of the card. And so they call this the Drowning Man Island, because it looks like a little man in the water drowning. And there are some other variations of these, which look like this, where basically they're Guru lands that are entirely missing the stamp. And so those are stampless Gurus. It's kind of funny, isn't it, that the cool thing about the Guru land is the bronze stamp, because that's a unique thing to that card, but yet the version without the stamp that looks just like a basic land is worth exponentially more money. Collectors are weird that way. Finally, we have my favorite recent misprint, and this is one that is going to be very hard to capture on camera. So on the front, it's a beta mountain, and it looks completely normal. And honestly, the back looks normal too. But if you catch it just right in the light, and I'm really not sure if I'm capturing this correctly, but if you capture it just right in the light, you can see a kind of an iridescent green shimmer, which is not normal for Magic cards. I'm going to just try to get as much footage as I can of this. And so this is a very subtle thing. Now, in person, it really pops. And so it's one of those cases of I tell people about this misprint, and they kind of don't believe it's special until I get it into the same room as them, and then they ask how much money I want for it. And there's a cool story with this, where a friend of mine actually noticed over many years a couple of these in the wild and managed to acquire them. He sold one to me, and I was super proud of it. And then I realized, you know what? I've got a ton of beta cards. I mean, not literally, it's just a few hundred kilos. Kidding. I've got a ton of beta cards. I should go through them and see what I can find. And so I actually managed to find this mountain among my own collection, which was pretty cool. Okay, so next up I want to talk about test prints. Well, what are test prints? Here are some early ones. These are ones made by Richard Garfield himself or early Magic the Gathering developers when they were creating the game initially back in, the early 90s. And so these are cards that were printed out on office printers, photocopied on a Xerox machine, hand illustrated with colored pencils. And the purpose of these cards was to iterate on testing the game quickly while they were making it. They didn't have time to actually go and print finished cards with finished artwork at the time. They just wanted to get playing and making Magic the Gathering. And these are very collectible. I mean, I looked very, very long and hard in order to find this New Zealand island, for example, for my land collection. And I collect the card Desert and was given this recently by two very good friends, and I really appreciated that. So some of these cards have special meaning to me, but in general, I don't like this type of test print. I feel that it's far too easy to counterfeit. I mean, anyone with a printer can make something that looks pretty similar, and how are you going to authenticate them? In fact, there was a scandal with Pokemon cards early this year, where it turns out that some of the recently sold similar types of test prints had some issues with being printed recently, and they were only able to determine this because printers have forensic dots that are printed on pages in order to help track down crime, and in this case it did catch some crime. So I don't love this type of test print. I mean, I do have a few of them, but certainly it's not something I'm focusing on with my land collection, and especially not with my test prints. I will show you some that are far more interesting soon. So a more modern version, and by modern I still mean decades ago, of that type of test print is this, where this is what they're using internally, day-to-day playtesting. This is back in the 90s still. And so they basically just print them out, stick them on some cards, and do playtesting as they're iterating. And this looks a lot more sophisticated than the ones like this that I was showing you a second ago. In some cases, they wanted to test what the print of a card is like rather than the functionality. And so you get cards like this, which are very clearly just showing, like, what does a card look like when you actually take it to the printers and print it? There are some interesting cards called Make-Readies, where basically these are some from the Unlimited set, where you can tell they've got square corners, apart from this one on the side here, which is subtly different. And so this is them testing unlimited printings of cards. But the cool thing about these is that on the back, you can see that they have both an Unlimited and Antiquities card printed on top of each other. And so this is just because they're reusing sheets within Wizards, or within the print company. Basically, they're just testing what things look like, and they can print multiple times on top of an existingly printed sheet, making those very cool for collectors. When they were testing revised cards, they printed ones with various colored backgrounds. And of course, these are lands, so I needed them for my collection. These ones have white backs, but they're still printed on Magic cardstock. So they are Magic cards as far as I'm concerned, and when you examine it with a jeweler's loupe, you can see the rosette pattern in the print, but they are test prints for revised to see what would happen with colored borders. I'm glad that Magic cards didn't end up with I'm glad it took several decades for Magic cards to end up with yellow borders like this, but I digress. So this is a test print for a German foreign black border dual land from the German version of Revised, and it has a white back. And so many people will assume that this means it's an artist proof, but foreign cards in this set did not get artist proofs, and so this is them basically testing what the card would print like. This one here is a 4th edition test print, mostly interesting because it has no text, but also because the Magic back looks different than normal. If we compare it to, trying to find a card with a Magic back to compare it to. If we compare it to, for example, this one, you can see that the colors are all different. Okay, so next up we have these really interesting ones where they essentially have the art of land, but the mana cost, text, and functionality of a different card. And so, for example, this one here is Weakness. It says, creature gains -2/-1, and it's an enchant creature. It's called Weakness, I hope, and black mana cost. And in this case, normal Magic back. In this case, normal Magic back. But things get interesting over here. So this one here, which I think is Wall of Wood, you can see a normal Magic back and the special one with a white background. Now, despite that, I believe that the one with the normal Magic back is actually worth marginally more than this cool one with the white background. For example, there is a normal Magic backed version of this Dark Ritual Island. I have the white backed version. This was a very expensive card to acquire, and the one with the Magic back is even more expensive. And that is an example of a holy grail card for my land collection, where I collect lands, I care about it. This is the best one of the ones that does something else because Dark Ritual is so playable, it just looks so cool, and I would move heaven and earth in order to get the Magic-backed version of that. But I can't because there's like 3 or 4 of them out there, and those people want far, far, far too much money. So in the meantime, I am very happy to have this version with the white back. I mean, it looks cooler on first glance, and it was a recent pickup that I'm very proud of. And so these are examples of test prints that they only appeal to a very niche group of people like me, but they're very special because they were printed for some specific reason. There aren't many copies of them, and we really like them. Okay, so next up, when they were starting to print foil cards for Magic the Gathering, they wanted to test what they would look like, and so they decided to use City of Traitors and a couple of other things to do this test. And so there's a whole different pile of versions of City of Traitors here that have different treatments, like, what's going on with that foiling technique. These are actually printed on like 1 mm thick plastic, basically. This here has a silver border, this has a black border, and there's different color permutations of these. So you can see this here has green, this one here has a more blue/dark color, this one has a yellow background, and you can see they have numbers. That one's +1, this one's +3, and so on. That's a -1. And I kind of went through a phase of collecting this specific card for a while, and at the time they were quite hard to find, but since then the ostensible price that people are listing them for has gone up ridiculous amounts. Like, you see cards like this listed for $40,000 at MagicCon, and I don't know if anyone's paying that. I think it's insanity for them to be worth that much, but I'm certainly glad that I picked up my collection of those before they got expensive. It would be a mess otherwise. So next up, and talking about foil tests, this is a relatively subtle set of test prints that most people don't acknowledge. So these are some basic lands from Odyssey. They have square corners, and the foil type of printing here is subtly different to normal cards. I don't actually understand the technical details, but allegedly the foiling that was used here was as a test, and we didn't end up with those particular types of foils in the future. I can't tell the difference between these and normal regular Magic card foils, except this does come as a test set entirely with square corners, which is pretty cool. Okay, next up we have some test prints that people just generally don't know exist. So this is when they're designing stuff for legions, which, as you may know, is a set without creatures. For whatever reason, these lands have the legion symbol on them. And so there's some basic lands over here, and there's these regular lands here. Now, looking at what they do, so Shore of Confusion, for example, says, tap, pay 1 life, sacrifice it, search your library for an island card and put it into play. So this is a variation on a fetch land. This one here doesn't involve tap, but you still have to sacrifice it. Similar kind of thing, fetches forests. But I believe that Peaks of Despair up here, which is spelt wrong, is potentially the best Magic card ever printed. And I say that because look at what it does. Tap, pay 1 life, search your library for a mountain, put it into play, then shuffle. It doesn't require sacrificing this. So every single turn you get to accelerate out an extra mountain. Like, the impact that would have in a modern game of Magic in terms of mana-based dominance is ridiculous. And so this is an example of a card where I suspect they just, got the templating wrong compared to the other ones. And, obviously we're never going to print it like that. It never was printed, I guess, as an actual Magic card. This is a one printed on Magic stock, but is not, physically in a booster pack. And I like test prints like this because they're moderately unknown. Like, I can show them to people and get a reaction every time. And as far as I know, this is the first time that they're being shown in a YouTube video. I have more from this particular set, which I managed to acquire back in 2019 in one go, which I was very pleased with. Okay, so next up we have M15 Test Prints. So basically, when they were working on M15, they wanted to try to come up with, like, for example, a custom font. They wanted a new layout of the cards. And so this is an example of them prototyping a basic land here. This is them doing a non-basic land. This isn't, it's a Magic card, but the symbol here is not actually a holographic one. It's just printed as gray. These are foil and non-foil versions, and my understanding, and I haven't fact-checked this prior to recording, but my understanding is Gotham was the name of the font that they switched to with M15. So those are M15 Test Prints. And it actually gets kind of interesting because that was also the set they introduced the symbol down the bottom, the one that looks like this, the anti-counterfeiting symbol. And so when they were doing that, they printed a set of these test cards here. Each one says test card, test card, test card, and they have different variations of a symbol. So here you can see a circle there you can see a diamond, here you can see what looks like the Innistrad logo, the Magic logo in different colors, before they eventually settled on the design of putting this down the bottom here instead. And so this is a set of all the different permutations of Dragon Skull Summit as test cards, and there's a few different ones of these. Next up, we have an example of basic land. There are the 5 of those, and my understanding is there is actually a 6th that I have not acquired. And this is why it's fun to be a collector of these things, because you think you have the complete set, and then someone shows you one of these with an orange symbol, and now you have a multi-year epic expensive quest to track it down. And most people who you talk to will say, oh no, there's only 5. I think you're correct already, but I'm pretty sure there is a 6th one that I need to acquire of those. If you have it, please get in touch. Okay, so next up in terms of test prints. So they were testing this mechanic called meld, where they wanted to print creatures that go across 2 cards. Now, Endbringer, I believe, never ended up as an actual meld creature, and it's missing a symbol up here. But these were printed on lands, which means I get to collect them for my set. And so I was quite pleased. It's one of the things where, like, you hear that someone has these test prints, you hear they run a bakery in New York City, you have to track them down by, like, doing a bit of detective work until you can eventually message them and say, hey, by chance, do you collect Magic the Gathering cards, and can you sell me some meld test prints? And then they do. And it's such a cool story collecting something like that. Okay, so next up in terms of test prints, these are going to be quite hard to see, but these are for, I think, Time Spiral Remastered. They were testing various foiling stuff, and these look like normal cards except for the weird foiling. And right down the bottom, and there's no way we're going to be able to see this on camera easily, but just under the copyright line here, there's some very small microscopic text you can see with a jeweler's loop that says, like, test print or something along those lines. Like, I definitely can't read it from here. But those ones are pretty cool tests they were doing for that particular set. Some of my favorite test prints that don't have a good explanation are, okay, so this is a bicycle playing card, right? And on the back, it's Magic the Gathering. This one here is a Polluted Delta, and on the back, it's a bicycle playing card. And so you kind of have both sides of a playing card and both sides of a Magic the Gathering card. The texture of this one feels, I've got it in a sleeve, but the texture of this one feels like an actual playing card rather than a Magic the Gathering card. Interestingly, because a whole deck of these was printed, or several decks, this thing here wasn't expensive, it was like $20. This thing was, though. Okay, so one of the special test prints that I've been saving for last is this. So that's Swarovski, sorry, I'm pronouncing it wrong, Swarovski crystal, and essentially this was it's hard to say whether Wizards commissioned this or whether someone had it made in an attempt to get Wizards to do it, but basically it was for the M30 celebration. You can see they've put little stones on the back here, and basically for the 30th anniversary of Magic, they wanted to do something special, and so they've taken this full art island here and covered it in gemstones. It's pretty cool. There's some other ones available of these online. There's a Black Lotus, I believe, for example, but that was too rich for my blood. So I settled on an island, which I am very happy with. It feels hefty. Like that's a thick boy there. So this is one of the favorite cards in my collection I've picked up. It's just so, sparkly, but so different to most other test prints that I have in the collection. Okay, so one of the types of test prints that I skipped over that I'd like to focus on briefly is 8th edition test prints. And so they look like this. Now, these don't look like Magic cards to you or me, and that's, the reason why is because they decided not to go ahead with it. But basically, this is a swamp, it taps for black. This is a Darkwater Catacombs, it filters, as you expect. And these were printed when trying to test what the new 8th edition frame should look like. And I think we may be able to show you some more examples here. So there's actually a lot of these, both foil and non-foil, so you can see the different permutations. Some of these have both left and right sides, as in the symbols are either on the left or the right, which is cool. And I have been picking these up for a number of years whenever they're cheap. Obviously they were much cheaper in the past, they're more expensive now. Here's an example of both the left and the right sides for Underground River. And so most of the stuff I picked up when it was very inexpensive back in the day, but it's getting harder to find them these days. I think I have the world's largest collection of 8th edition test print lands at this stage. Now, I've purposefully avoided collecting the other types of cards from the 8th edition test prints. It's, there's a variety of them. I focused entirely on lands myself. Okay, next up. So this card is Gaea's Cradle. It's a staple that's played in Legacy. It taps for 1 green for each creature you control, and this particular example here is miscut, showing a blue card on the left there. And so miscut cards are generally worth quite a lot more if they show an extra card, and so this is the kind of thing someone could pimp out their EDH deck, assuming it's legal in EDH, which I should have fact-checked prior to recording this. It's at least legal in Legacy, so they can pimp out their Legacy deck. This one here is the same thing, but with a significant miscut, right? That's showing like a good few millimeters of the neighboring card without cutting off anything important from this one. And so after I acquired these, I went on a bit of a mission to get as many cool Gaea's Cradles as I could. This is a mission that led to much insanity. So Here is a foil judge promo. The card was not printed as foil normally, but there were some foil versions made and given to judges a long time ago. This version is pretty heavily miscut. You can see that it barely has a border at the top, and it has quite a thick border at the bottom. This version here is slightly more extreme. This version here, more extreme again. And I believe that this technically shows a little bit of the sheet edge here, which makes it even more special. This version here, even more extreme, showing even more sheet edge, like a good 1.5 millimeters or so of sheet edge there. So those are my 4 miscut foil cradles. This one here is a foil cradle with square corners. I don't know how the process results in a square cornered cradle, but that exists. This one here and this one here are both shifted. So in this case, the text layer is a little bit higher than the symbols, and you can see that the text overlaps with the border there, and the mana symbol is shifted down. And so those are very special. It took a lot of effort to collect them. And the most important of these, though, is this one here. So this is a textless cradle. And I would say that out of my misprint or test print cards, this is the one that gets the most attention. Like, this is the one where if I have it with me at, say, MagicCon, it causes a queue of people who want to see it. It wasn't particularly expensive when I bought it a long time ago because, I guess the card wasn't as good relative to other ones then or whatever, or maybe people weren't collecting this particular type of thing. But I've been offered $70,000 in cash for it since then. It's certainly become very popular as one of the key test prints that people want to collect. And I suspect it's because it's such an iconic card and such an iconic deck that people really want the really pimped out foil version with no text on it whatsoever, apart from the little floating mana symbol by itself. So that's one of the pieces of my collection I'm most proud of. All right, so I wanted to kind of wrap up by showing you a slice of what it looks like to collect a relatively deep set of misprints and test prints related to one particular card. And that card here is a strip mine. So this is a non-misprinted one. It's just a regular strip mine. And at least it's what the card used to look like back in the day before they stuck a spaceship on it or whatever they did to the 2025 printing. And so this is a regular everyday strip mine showing you what it looks like before we get into the misprints. So this version here is a, I believe, Spanish burrowing card, and it has the strip mine art. So this is a misprint insofar as the fact they put the wrong art on the card, but it's not technically a strip mine as far as playing with the card, but it does go in this collection. So next up we have this version. It's crimped. As you can see, it may be a bit difficult to see. I'll just take it out of the card saver. You can see along the top here there's a crimp. So that is my one example of a crimped strip mine. This version here, which is, I believe, Italian, is off-center. You can see that it's somewhat mis-centered on both sides. Relatively minor misprint. This one here, which is a 4th edition one, is more off-center. This version here, which is, I think, a Chronicles copy of the card, is significantly off-center on the back, but not on the front. This version here, again, Italian Renaissance, is miscut so you can see a sheet edge on the top, and I believe it's only on the top. This version here, a more extreme example of that. This is a 4th edition one with alpha cut corners. You can see here that the corners are significantly more rounded. If you take a modern card, I'm trying to find like a normal Magic card. Okay, there we go. If you take a more modern card, you can see here that the corners are not quite as severe as that. And so this alpha cut one, they were using dyes like leftover from alpha or whatever. So this is an original Antiquities copy. This is where things start to get slightly expensive, and this particular one is miscut on the back, moderately severely actually. You can see quite a lot of the other card, and so that's like an alignment error with printing. This is another Antiquities copy, and this one is substantially miscut on the back. I was very pleased to pick that up. This is an Antiquities copy that is miscut on the front, so you can see another card, and so that's one of the more like pimp ones you can put in your deck because it's an original printing, it shows another card, it certainly would attract attention. Interestingly, the back is completely aligned, so this is one of the slightly rarer types of miscuts where the sheet itself is actually misaligned. This is an albino copy, like the Urza lands that I showed you earlier. This is one of my favorite pickups in the last few years. It took a long time to track that down, and certainly is probably the most pimp copy that I would play with if using a strip mine myself. Then finally, a test print strip mine. This one has a normal looking front. I mean, the corners are pretty square, it's in pretty rough shape, and the back looks like this. I don't know why they were testing printing that on the back of Magic cards. There's a whole story about how Arabian Nights was going to have a different Magic card back. This is, months later at least, so I'm not sure what was going on with this particular test print. But this is one of my favorite strip mines in my collection. So that's the misprints and test prints I wanted to show you today. I've limited it to just this set. I actually have maybe 3,000 or 4,000 other misprints and test prints that I haven't shown you, partly because they're just, additional examples of the types that I've shown. I've shown you the main ones, which is important. And also, for brevity, I didn't want this video to go on too long. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I'm keen to share more of my Magic card collection in the future, alongside videos about game development and interviews with my favorite game developers.